They say comedians hide the deepest pain, and for decades, Christina Applegate did exactly that. Behind the laughter, the fame, and that unforgettable smile, she was silently carrying wounds that Hollywood never saw. But now, she's done hiding. In her first ever memoir, You with the Sad Eyes, Christina is finally pulling back the curtain on a life filled with heartbreak, abuse, and survival. She says this book isn't about pity, it's about truth, the kind that hurts, heals, and reminds us we're not alone. So why did she decide to tell it all now, after years of silence? And what shocking moments from her past does she finally reveal? Let's break it down. It started quietly. Just a single post and an exclusive reveal from People magazine. But within hours, Christina Applegate's name was everywhere again, not for a new show or red carpet moment, but for something far more personal. At 53 years old, the Dead to Me star announced her very first memoir, titled You with the Sad Eyes. And instantly, fans were struck by the title alone, soft, poetic, and heartbreakingly honest. That the cover shows Christina looking straight into the camera. No characters, no roles, no filters, just her. The kind of gaze that says, I've lived through it, and I'm still here. In her statement, Christina admitted she wrote this book to make people feel less alone. She promised it wouldn't be some dramatic cry for sympathy, but a real, unfiltered story of her life's highest highs and deepest lows. And when you read her words, you can feel it, that raw mix of strength and exhaustion, like someone finally ready to stop performing and start healing. But what exactly made her take this leap to tell the stories she once swore she'd keep buried? That answer lies deep in her past, long before fame ever found her. Before Christina Applegate became a Hollywood star, she was just a quiet girl growing up in the wild heart of Laurel Canyon, a place known for music, rebellion, and broken dreams. The 1970s and 80s scene around her was legendary, full of rock stars, artists, and chaos. But for Christina, it wasn't glamorous. It was lonely, tumultuous, and sometimes terrifying. She was surrounded by adults chasing fame and freedom, but as a child, she was left to navigate a world that didn't feel safe. In her memoir, she describes moments of abandonment, insecurity, and abuse, things she hid behind forced smiles and nervous laughter. Those early years shaped her, not through comfort, but through survival. Even as a little girl, she learned that the only way to be seen was to perform, to make people laugh, to pretend everything was fine. But the truth is, behind every camera flash and early audition, there was a kid fighting her own fear of being forgotten. And yet that fear, that pain became the fire that pushed her toward Hollywood, toward the fame that would define her, and nearly destroy her. Because when the world finally started watching Christina Applegate, they had no idea how much she'd already endured just to stand there. But the spotlight would bring its own kind of darkness. And that's where her story takes a powerful turn. When Christina Applegate stepped into the spotlight, it felt like she was born for it. Her sharp wit, effortless timing, and fearless energy made her unforgettable. At just 15, she became a household name as Kelly Bundy in Married with Children, the show that turned her into America's favorite troublemaker. But while the world laughed with her character, few realized how much of that humor came from pain. Behind every sarcastic grin, there was a young woman who had already learned how to hide her feelings, to use laughter as armor. Hollywood loved her. Directors wanted her. The audience couldn't get enough of her wild charm and perfect comedic timing. From The Sweetest Thing to Anchorman and Bad Moms, Christina built a career on making people smile. Even when she wasn't smiling inside, she played strong, confident women, but off camera, she was quietly fighting self-doubt and the ghosts of her past. The more successful she became, the more she felt like she was living two separate lives, one in front of the cameras, and one that no one ever saw. And it was that hidden version of herself, the one haunted by insecurity, pain, and loss, that she would one day have to face. But that reckoning wouldn't come until her body forced her to stop running. Because years later, everything changed with just 3 letters. Ms. It was 2021 when Christina Applegate's world suddenly stopped. After months of exhaustion, pain, and strange physical changes, doctors finally gave her the news no one ever wants to hear. She had multiple sclerosis. For a woman who had spent her whole life dancing, acting, moving, and doing, that diagnosis hit like a wall. One day she was on set, delivering lines with her trademark energy, and the next, she was struggling just to stand without help. She said in her own words, "All the things I thought were important shifted." And that sentence, simple but so full of truth, marked the moment Christina stopped living for the spotlight and started living for herself. The pace of Hollywood had always kept her running, from project to project, pain to pain, never stopping long enough to feel it all. But when her body forced her to slow down, the silence got louder. Memories, regrets, fears, everything she'd buried for decades, came rushing back. And in that stillness, she did something she'd never done before. She started writing. Not as a celebrity, not as a comedian, but as Christina, a woman finally ready to tell her truth. Her diagnosis didn't just change her career, it cracked her open. And from that breaking point, You with the Sad Eyes was born. But what exactly did she reveal in those pages, and why does she call it her most honest work yet? That's where things get even more personal. Christina Applegate's memoir, You with the Sad Eyes, isn't just another celebrity story. It's not polished, it's not sugar-coated. It's brutally real, a collection of memories, confessions, and lessons written by a woman who has walked through both spotlight and shadow. Inside those pages, Christina takes readers back to her childhood years filled with quiet loneliness, to the confusion of fame that came too early, and to the heartbreaks she hid behind her laughter. She opens up about the years when her smile was just armor, a performance, even off camera. Every chapter feels like a letter, sometimes angry, sometimes tender, but always truthful. She writes about the nights she cried after filming, the fear of losing control of her own body, and the bittersweet love she found in being a mother. Christina doesn't shy away from the pain. She writes about her double mastectomy, the brutal journey through MS, and how she learned to find light in the darkest corners of her life. But this isn't a story about suffering. It's a story about becoming, about a woman who finally stopped pretending everything was okay and started embracing what's real. You with the Sad Eyes is filled with tears, laughter, and a kind of beauty that comes only from breaking and then rebuilding yourself. And yet, there's one part of the book that's left everyone talking. A confession so raw, it's changed how people see her forever. As Christina Applegate looks back on her life, she doesn't see fame. She doesn't see red carpets, awards, or headlines. She sees moments, fleeting, fragile moments where she learned what truly matters. The laughter she once used as a mask has now become her strength. Her story isn't about being a Hollywood star. It's about being human, flawed, scared, and still finding the courage to keep going. Through her memoir, Christina leaves behind something far more powerful than a filmography. She leaves behind truth. She's teaching the world that it's okay to fall apart, that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about choosing to rise, again and again, even when your body tells you not to. In interviews, she's often said she doesn't want pity, she wants honesty, laughter, and love. And that's exactly what she's given us. Her legacy isn't defined by the roles she played, but by the way she's inspired millions to keep fighting their own battles, with a smile that hides both pain and grace. As Christina continues her journey with Emma, she reminds us of something simple yet profound, that beauty isn't in perfection, it's in perseverance. And maybe, when we look into her sad eyes, we're not seeing sorrow, we're seeing the strength of a woman who refused to give up even when the lights dimmed and the world stopped watching. And so, as the final chapter closes, Christina Applegate's story becomes more than just a memoir. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of what it means to live, to lose, to heal, and to keep moving forward, even when everything hurts. Her words aren't polished for fame or softened for comfort. They're raw, real, and painfully honest, the kind of truth that reaches into your soul and whispers, "You're not alone." You with the Sad Eyes isn't just about Christina's pain, it's about her power. A woman who once made the world laugh is now making it feel. A star who once lived in the spotlight now shines brighter in her vulnerability. Christina reminds us that life doesn't end when things fall apart. Sometimes, that's exactly when it begins. Because healing isn't about erasing the scars. It's about learning to see beauty in them. So, when her book hits the shelves, it won't just be another celebrity memoir. It will be a message, a lifeline, for anyone who's ever felt unseen, unheard, or unloved. And, as we turn that final page, one thing becomes clear. Christina Applegate isn't saying goodbye to her story. She's finally telling it her way.